Welcome into another episode of Making the Leap. We're so glad you're here with us today. We have just been having amazing, conversation after conversation with people that are, I would say, I don't want to use the word forefront. That's not the right word, but I want to say that they've just been massively influential in the different areas that they find themselves. We've been talking with some of our ambassadors here that are a new program here at Herzog. We've been talking with recipients of the Christian Teacher Awards. We've had a lot of them in, and just getting that opportunity to talk with people about where they're at in faith, in education has been tremendous.
The show continues to highlight people that are doing this in different ways, in different capacities all over the country. What I have loved about this, and I hope people that are regular listeners learn, is that there are so many options available to you in private education, be it home education, Christian education, classical Christian education, kingdom education, whatever you want to call it. We've learned about so many different variations of it, how it's done, how it's implemented, from just beginning to well-established schools. And we've got a great guest today to that end.
So we have with us today Maryellen St. Cyr, and she is the founder of Ambleside Schools International. And it jumped out at me, the name, her name jumped out at me, and she was introduced to us actually through some email connections, people that have been to Herzog, had heard of Herzog, and reached out and said, we think she'd be a great guest. And I want to say that because we really do value the connections and the commentary. People will send us an email and say, you should check this person out, or you should go ahead and talk with this person and see what you think. But this name jumped out at me because she used the word Charlotte Mason, or the words Charlotte Mason were used in the intro email.
We've learned about that on previous shows, Charlotte Mason.
Right, so that. Charlotte Mason, and just the books that she has written, Charlotte Mason, that she has written, things that I know have influenced a lot of people I know in the homeschooling world, classical style of education world. And so I really was interested in talking with her, with Maryellen today. And also just because, again, we've talked with so many people that are now in these last few years starting schools. They are branching out. They're doing things that are new, but I think we'll find in talking to Maryellen, this isn't necessarily new. We approach it like it's this big explosion, but it's new to us, but it really isn't new. So Maryellen, thank you so much today for being with us. We're so glad you're here.
It is my pleasure to be here with you both.
I've enjoyed it. We talked a little bit on the phone ahead of time, and I really appreciate that too, because very specifically, you and I were talking just to make sure that what you were doing and what we were doing is beneficial, that it's mutually beneficial, that it's can help you, can help us, that kind of thing. And I think that's important because one thing you and I talked about is that there are so many different ways to approach kingdom education, classical education, people that don't even want to use the word education, that there's so many different routes that people can go. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that first, just that just kind of speak a little bit to the different approaches that you've seen over the years in your experience.
Thank you for that question. So throughout my years, I've been interested in education as a teacher. And then as a teacher, I was single for most of those years, and so I had plenty of time. And in that time, I would read different books about Marva Collins, I would read about other educators, and then I would go and visit schools. Because I was thinking about my own practice and my own pedagogy and what was happening in the classroom. And we would talk to each other at recess, different teachers, and if they told me something, I thought, I'm going to do that too, and we shared ideas that way.
Yeah.
But I began to think about congruency. And when I was reading Charlotte Mason's book, she talks about philosophy and practice of education that's grounded. And I think about sometimes the education we have in the United States, and a lot of our grounding is on I want, I feel, I like. And so it is with teachers. I like to do this. I can't wait to do this unit study. I'm so excited about this book.
I've been super guilty of that, by the way, as a teacher, 100%.
And so I, too, have been guilty of that. But then I thought, what could we do? What could be better? I didn't know. And so someone gave me the 6 volumes of Charlotte Mason, and I began reading them. And so I began with School Education, Book 3. And as I read, I began to grow. And change is synonymous with growth.
And you've been teaching for how long prior to reading those books?
I would say probably 11 years.
Okay.
So a decade in, and Did this fundamentally change your view of education after reading Charlotte Mason?
My view was changing every day. So it wasn't a matter of just at one big time in my life, oh, now I'm going to change. But I had asked my principal, I said, if what I read in this book is true, can I do it the next day in the class and change things? He said, absolutely.
And what would be for somebody that, I guess I'll actually back it up for a minute too. Can you share a little bit about the philosophy behind Charlotte Mason's writings?
We've done this in previous shows, but people
it's
are
been
just
a while,
jumping in and maybe have never heard
Yes.
it and haven't gone back to hear. Explain Charlotte Mason to us briefly, if you would.
So Charlotte Mason is a British educator who lived from 1842 to 1923. And she started a training college for teachers, mostly governesses, women who would go into the homes of wealthy people and they would be the teacher. But as times changed in England, then they started having schools not just for boys, but for girls too. And so there were these women who would go and start in a neighborhood, in a home they would have that was given to them, and then they would build out a school. And still often some of the genders are separated in schooling, but in the poorer areas they're often together. And I suppose so. I haven't really looked into it lately, but that they've changed in many ways in these later times. But one of the things about Charlotte Mason is in this training college, she began to look at children differently. She was never married. She never had children of her own, but she began to think very deeply about a child and about the way we relate with children in the realm of education. Her first premise that she talked about is children are persons. Now, what she meant by that is she says that children are persons, and because they're persons, they exceed our power of measurement. It's kind of an unfortunate thing, but the beginning of the time when a mom holds the babe in her arm, there are other people who begin saying things, oh, she's going to be brilliant just like her father. She looks like her grandfather. Or they'll say, oh, she has her personality of this, or she's a little cantankerous. And we begin defining the child in varied ways. And then as they grow older and they submit their will to the clamor about them, then they begin to even define it in more definite ways. Oh, they're an introvert. They're an extrovert. And I think about these things deeply because I think we're very keen on this in the U.S., especially of how we define children, how we define persons. And she says, but they exceed our power of measurement. I mean, who are we after all, even if you are the parent, that you could begin to define your child in such ways that it would limit them and that they would think, well, I'm not the music person in the family. I'm the athletic person. And so what would it look like if a child had this broad education in which they were introduced to 13 or 14 different subjects in a given week, and they all were taught to dance and to play an instrument and to sing and to be athletic and to engage in a way in which they had ways of choosing when they were older because they had understanding and they had experience.
I see a lot of that coming into play in a lot of the co-ops that I've either talked with people who've started them, founded them, or been involved in them, where they really are not pigeonholing the kids into certain areas, like you were saying, that if they're going to put on a play, everybody's going to put on a play, and we're going to do all kinds of things about it. And it's not the theatrical group that gets to do it, but it's everybody. And they get that chance to kind of see what they're good at, what their experience is with it, and then go from there. Or if it's, I don't know, we're going to tap trees and make maple syrup. We're all going to be doing this together, and we're all going to be naturalists. We're all going to be outside. We're all going to be doing this. And not just the kids, but the parents coming alongside as well, which I think probably plays a little bit into that as well, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's just something for people to think about, that it's like you said, I think it's a different way to look at kids than what we're used to.
And I would ask Maryellen, if I could then, this is not necessarily theologically based, though, is it? Is the Christian component brought in to partner with Charlotte Mason, or is there a Christian strain or theology through Charlotte Mason's program?
No, she built her philosophy on the faith, on the Anglican faith.
I don't think I knew that part of it. So this was always a Christian-based curriculum.
Yes.
Okay.
And you were in a Christian school getting to implement her philosophies into your classroom.
Yes.
And then that is where you started to see a shift in what you were doing versus what you wanted to do and what you felt was right. Is that my understanding?
So I wouldn't want to put it in degrees of right and wrong.
No, that's
because
fair,
it's what I felt was best.
Yep.
So is it better to have everybody as an active learner, or to allow just the persons who are more verbose to raise their hand and take over the class and talk all the time? But isn't it better to even allow the quiet ones to answer questions? So in our schools, you rarely see children raise their hands because they're called upon. Teachers keep notes of who participated in science yesterday, who participated in math, who came to the board. Why? Because we want everybody to see themselves as an active learner in every subject. We don't want a child choosing at 8 to 10, not that it would be impossible, or there might even be a light from heaven that would communicate otherwise, but that they would define themselves in such a way that they say, oh, I'm only good at math, or I'm only good at sport. We'd say, well, you don't know yet. You haven't had these other subjects. Let's try. Let's participate fully.
And so from there, where did you then, from that place of, if this works, can I try this? Let me see if this works. And if this works, I can keep doing that. How did you get from there to becoming the founder of Ambleside Schools?
Yeah, let's start a school is always a big leap. Particularly back in 2000, this was, I like to say, for people that are like you, that were sort of, maybe pioneers, too strong a word, but I will say that what we know today about Christian education and private and homeschooling is not anything like it was 24 years ago. I mean, that was still relatively uncharted water, was it not, when you started Ambleside? What went into that?
So why do people change? Why do people grow? Knowledge. I was gaining understanding. I had visited England several times. I became friends with Susan Schaefer Macaulay. She was my tutor at L'Abri. She took me to these remnants of schools in which they practiced these ideas years ago, but they weren't being practiced anymore. And I just thought, what would it look like? Because this is true. This is the way it should be. We all look at our own lives as adults sometimes and think, wow, there were some limitations put on me. There were limitations in my schooling and my family, because they just thought, well, oh, you're interested in that? Just go for it. But they didn't really see what a broad curriculum would do, and broad insight into other ways of being in the world and different activities and different times of leisure. So we always chose one thing and stayed with it. And then, we looked around and think, wow, I wish I would have known about this and this and this. And granted, we have our whole lives to learn and to grow. So when I was in these schools, when I was a teacher, I felt like I was causing a little bit of dissonance in our schools, because different parents would maybe clamor to be in my class because they knew that there were some different things going on. Not everybody was interested in these ideas. I was paid to teach teachers in this philosophy and practice, but when I entered a teachers meeting with 40 persons there, they would say, are you going to talk about Charlotte Mason again? And I'd say, yes, that's what I get paid for. And, but I'm not a person who wants to intentionally or purposefully create some discord. So I just thought, well, God, I think you're causing me to leave and to go and do something else. And I remember leaving a board meeting in which a school I was principal at, and I had much freedom there. But I was praying on the way home, and I was driving on I-75, and this school had board meetings starting at 10 o'clock at night, and they went to 1 o'clock in the morning because the children were all in bed by then.
Oh, my gosh.
And these were very dedicated people. But as I was driving home and in traffic, there was an accident up ahead, and I started praying. I said, God, will you help me start a school? And I said, I'll know you want me to start a school if I get $1 million, and I'll only use the interest. And then I heard this voice in my head, it's not going to happen that way. You're going to have to trust me. And I said, I can trust you. I will trust you. And so I had this thought in my mind, I'm going to start a school. I read a book that Susan Macaulay had given me about a lady that said, I buy a school. And she was a single woman. And I was reading lately of the women in England after World War II. Many of them never could ever think of getting married because there were hardly any men around.
Right.
And so there were a lot of these women who I was able to meet, a few of them, who had given their whole lives to education and to learning and growing up children. And this was one of them. And when I read about her book, I just thought, it seemed like unique. It seemed like something that I'd want to do and be a part of. And yet I knew that I didn't have all the gifts and abilities to make it happen, that I would need help and support. So I took a year off and decided to think about next steps and pray. And I was staying in the guest house of some friends of mine. And then I decided to start a study group studying these principles of education. And these persons were all homeschooling. And sure enough, these persons became very interested in these ideas and said, would you start a school here? It was Texas, though. And Texas has one season. And
Yep.
I really like the seasons. I love being in the snow and the cold and all of the beautiful autumn and those kinds of things. But, I said, God, I prayed about it and thought about it and had a group of people praying for me. And so I ended up starting the first Ambleside School in Fredericksburg, Texas, a town of 10,000.
And how did your enrollment, how did that happen? Did you have a lot of people interested right away? Did you have a small amount? Did it grow? Talk a little bit about
How
that.
the heck did you spread the word in a place you didn't really know, I guess?
Right.
But I knew people who knew people there.
Okay.
Which is huge, right? That's how I think so many people that we talk to are getting things done.
Yep.
Like they know people who know people.
So we had a meeting at an art gallery in town, and we had over 100 people, just a little bit over 100 people. And any of the new guests that had come there that were seemingly interested, none of them signed up.
Oh, wow.
So, but we did have from the little study group and the friends of the study group. So we started the school beginning with grade 3 through grade 9.
Okay.
Not exactly a model for a school start. And there were 28 students.
Okay.
And so we didn't grow from the bottom up. And so that was a little hard time coming because then we had to give some attention to the bottom so that we could grow the school in a more deliberate way.
Mostly younger students or middle school? What ages would you
you
say?
said
Yeah,
3
third through 8, so 8 through
Oh.
13.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you had varying ages of those 20 some. Yeah.
Wow. That would be a tough, the school that we initially looked at when we switched our daughter out of her public school was going to be grades 7, 8, 9, and 10, I think, to start, because that's where those parents, a ton of middle school and high school parents had this, they were like, we've got to get out, we've got to change something. And so that was exactly what they were going to do. And we didn't have a big middle school and high school option. We didn't have a lot of options around us. So we had this one, and then their plan was then to add, the next grade, obviously, like as the 10th grader became 11th, grow that 6th, 7th grade. And I think now they are like a 6 through 12. But they said it had some different challenges, just having these interim, these little years. And Refine KC, another school that started, they had, 2 in this grade, 3 in this grade, and 4 in nothing down, nothing in the one grade. And they had to kind of adapt. And I think that's probably something you came across a lot, right? Like that would just be,
what do you think outsiders, traditional public school folks, how would they define what you do you think? Could you answer that? I mean, what do they think you're doing at Ambleside? Have you heard it described or anybody looked at it curiously? Because I sincerely believe this. It's not a knock, but I think you understand it. We, those of us in this universe of a different way of educating kids, I think are still seen as a foreign planet to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. That makes sense?
Yes. So I'm not sure what they think, but I would say that anyone who's at heart a teacher and is a heart to want to know and to grow, I think if they gave it some thought and time, that they would see the beauty and the truths that are before us and how we relate with children in a classroom-like setting, in learning and growing together. So I think, every good science teacher, whether you're teaching 11th grade or whether you're teaching 2nd grade, you're going to have that intimacy that's developed over time with the subject and with students, and that there's a connectedness that, it's unbelievable. I remember being in classrooms in which I was teaching and students responding in ways that I didn't think was possible. And yet, it's something that you wish you could capture forever on film or in a book or something, but it was for that time and just that space. And yet it was a really growing time. It was a personal time.
I would imagine that the premise behind the philosophy of Charlotte Mason and what she was doing is very different from our 2023 existence with phones and technology and all that kind of around it. And so how I don't want to say this is probably going to sound naive and not the way I mean it to sound, but how do you get this to work when you, in a school setting, with her premises of nature and philosophy and those kinds of things, while you are competing with technology?
I'll play devil's advocate and say, is what you've told us an antiquated way of learning in 2023? That's just a devil's advocate question, not my editorial.
I don't believe that, but I'm
just
curious how you approach it.
Mm-hmm. So it is antiquated, but it's also modern.
Yes.
Okay.
And so truth is constant no matter when the time it's used.
Good.
And so when you think about what does it mean to know, is it's a mind-to-mind connection with the mind of someone else, whether the mind's in a book or if it's in a film or if it's in a experience or, you look at nature. So you're connecting with mind. And there's all ways of connecting in that aspect through a written text, through something that you see, any of the sensory gates that you take in, you can learn and you can grow. So it is, I would say people would say it's not modern because we don't use technology in our schools. I mean,
And you don't use it at all, is that correct?
Well, we have lights and electricity, but I know in the 21st century sense that, yes, we don't, our teachers, we have our whole teacher site on SharePoint, so we use it.
But you're right.
But the teachers don't open up their computer in the classroom, and
They're not projecting things up on screens for kids to learn, to do work up there. You're not doing any of that?
no, we're not.
And that is that seen as a net negative? Is bringing in a laptop, bringing in a phone, bringing in screens, is that considered counterintuitive to the curriculum?
So I was visiting a Christian school in another state, and they had asked me to come specifically to view these several lessons. And on the one lesson I went in, I was somewhat surprised. It was a science lesson. It was a state-of-the-art equipment. They had 3 screens with large and beautiful, and the students' desks were all around, and they were showing National Geographic science. And it was, no one can do it better than National Geographic. And she wanted me to observe her class. And I thought it was strange because it's pretty passive.
They're not
teachers
doing it right.
sitting,
And they're watching.
sitting and watching. And so when the students left and when she was finished, I said, will this be their first question tomorrow? Are we going to watch another movie? And she goes, exactly.
Wow.
I said, because they can never get enough.
Right. They want to keep get fed that way versus experiential learning, I would assume. Right?
Right.
That would be the difference.
We go to museums and we take trips that we see things that we wouldn't be able to see at school, but it's still more of an active state and not a passive state. When someone reads science and they begin to look at the language of science and they begin to be able to understand it and they tell it back and they look at the pictures and they read the captions underneath the pictures and then they explain the picture, they're connecting words with thoughts and now they have something called understanding. It's easy. I'm pretty much a key person for this description is that when the film goes on, my head begins to wane and I begin to get very tired and almost could fall asleep. And so everybody would laugh at me growing up is, are you going to be able to stay up? And I go, I'll try. I don't necessarily think children are falling asleep in class, but I do think that their mind has clicked off.
What would a third grade or a fourth grade class, let's say a language arts class, fourth grade, within Ambleside, one of your schools, what would that look like? What does the classroom look like? What's happening with the kids? What's happening with the teacher? What makes it different and set apart?
So if you go to any of our schools, you would see that we have real stuff in the classroom. So we have real wood in the classrooms. Our desks are made of wood. That we have real carpet, sometimes oriental rugs. We have real pictures and paintings on the walls. We don't have anything from the teacher supply stores hanging on our walls. And so we have things that we're studying all about us. We might have a fish tank. We would have some plants in there, and we would most often like a window or two so they could see the outdoors and have bird feeders on the grounds, et cetera, so that we're engaged in looking at nature and being in nature. And things are put in place. So you're not allowed to bring anything from home to go to school except for your lunch and your coat. So we provide all the pencils. I remember when I had an English woman come to visit the school that I was teaching at in Atlanta, and she looked at this one classroom, and every student had this big gulp cup, and they were filled with pencils. And then others had pencils that had these 3 to 6 inch tails that they were flipping around that they had gotten from somewhere. And she goes, why all of that stuff? And, because it was, and I'm like, this is common. It didn't seem an anomaly to me.
Right.
But it taught me something. She goes, we have one pencil. And I thought, we'll have one pencil. And so we buy the pencils, and when a student needs another pencil, we give them another pencil.
Right.
And so it's just easier. We're not distracted with our stuff.
Why? I know this just because I've actually had some conversations, but I would love to hear your answer for somebody else. When you specifically said the desks are made of wood and you have an oriental carpet, why does that matter to somebody? Why does that matter for a kid in a classroom?
Because it's real. So, whether it looks like wood or is wood makes, maybe it's not real.
Right.
But still, it was made with, it's not something that's just manufactured, that's metal, that's, and that the floors, they're soft. We can, and some would say, no, they're not soft. But you can sit on the carpet. You're not sitting on the cold floor. And there's a sense of beauty that comes in when people look at our classrooms, they go, this is very different. And so it looks home-like, but there's many desks in there, and there's chalkboards and dry erase boards that students use for different activities. So we have technology that's new, but it's not in the same of computer technology.
Sure.
So I would gather then that in the same way instruction is different, metrics in terms of testing, or is there such a thing as testing, or how are the metrics, if there are any, for students' advancement met or measured?
So we assess. So we call them assessments.
Okay.
So in any given week, a student might have a math assessment when the teacher deems it's important. So we're always assessing orally as the students participate. We ensure that students know their math facts and addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And we shore them up at recess time by just saying, do you know 6 times 9, 8 times 8? And if they cannot say it readily, then we say, you still don't know it. You need to practice that. And so we ensure that they are thorough in their practices and that they actually have gained understanding of these facts so that they can use them without thinking. So we assess them in oral ways. We assess them in written ways. We have exams 2 times a year. And Charlotte Mason had examinations when I visited a Charlotte Mason school in England. It was during exam time. And during this time, the mothers had come and they were the scribes for the students. So this question would be asked. The parent was there and she would write. And so we have that same approach, but our parents don't write, they type because it's easier for them and it's easier for us to read as well.
Is that for all grades or just the younger grades?
So it's for the younger grades, but so kindergarten through 3rd grade, all their assessments are typed.
I think that's really intriguing, actually. When we talk about, I taught some preschool for a while, and then I taught a preschool for a little bit with Montessori style, and that was very different from the preschool, like you said, with the cute bulletin boards and the things up. It was such a different environment. But I think just the idea of sitting down, my child is being asked a series of questions, and I'm going to write those answers down. They're able to explain what they need, and you can absolutely see what they know versus the child that has, I can't get it from my head to my hand, therefore you fail, therefore we've set you back.
Yeah.
You don't get to progress, even though you absolutely could have explained it out loud. That's what I think is so intriguing about this. And this is one of the things that I think maybe, I know we talk about, but maybe not enough, that yes, we feel kingdom education is important, but more than that, I think is just knowing the parent, knowing the child, and what learning style and mode is going to fit them, which is why I think people choose to pull and homeschool, or, because they can create that that sanctuary space for a learning environment versus the methodical desks in classroom, with all the crazy bulletin boards and all the noise and all the things. And so I guess, Maryellen, I'm just, just kind of like speaking on my own experience here of what I've seen, but I love that. I love that idea of a parent being able to help and be a partner in that process rather than just be a bystander.
Well, that's what I wonder. Is this better suited for a group environment, a classroom of students, or is there such a thing as better, a classroom of students versus a one-on-one parent to student at home ratio? Does this work either way, or is there one preferred?
I mean, I prefer the classroom because the engagement's more active. Mm-hmm. And if you call on a student at home and the child says, I don't remember, but that happens in the classroom. Sure. Mm-hmm. But it's okay. Well, who can help?
Someone jumps in.
And then someone jumps in. And then also the student doesn't fail to hear the knowledge that he couldn't remember. Now he can hear it from a friend. And so there's no shame for not knowing. And so children often say, I wasn't giving good attention. Mm-hmm. Could you call on someone else? And so there's a lot of honesty. There's integrity in this method in that everybody's important. We're not looking to, one out best another. We're just all trying to grow in the areas of our weaknesses and in our ways in which we need to be more informed.
You've started how many of these schools now altogether, Ambleside?
Well, I only started one.
Okay.
But that model has grown to over 25.
Wow. And internationally now, I understand. You have not just domestically, but international schools?
Yes, we have them in South Africa, Mozambique, Nigeria, Austria, and also India.
Ooh.
And do you primarily, how does your professional development work? Do you primarily do that for, do you have programs? Do you travel to individual schools? How does that work? Because I also would imagine you need to have teachers that have the buy-in, that have the background, that have the knowledge, some coming in at different levels of experience. How does that work?
Yeah, like I guess a quality control too.
Yeah.
I not to be vulgar about it, but I think about, you hear Ray Kroc talking about franchising McDonald's. There's a standard. There's got to be an operational standard, I would assume, that you started yours and you'd like all the others to follow. True?
Correct. So there's principles in which we live by or which we educate by. So we have a teacher training we just finished in Colorado with 60 teachers that are new to our schools, and some homeschoolers were there as well. And so we train them in the philosophy, that they understand what it means for education to be an atmosphere, what's breathed in by the teacher, what's breathed in by students. Then we talk about how do you train in habit. Like the word habit is hardly ever used in the schoolroom. It's not habit. We're going to learn a habit today. It's just like, this is the way we put things in our desk. Let's open our desks. And then we show them how to order the desks. And this is how we line up. We just say, line up. Don't try to be next to your friend. Don't try to go at the end. Don't try to be in the beginning. Don't try to be in the middle. And don't try to be last. And so can we just say, line up? Yeah. Yes. And so these ways of being are pretty easily, but we always thought we had to do something to motivate, to manipulate, and yet it's really not needed. And we only have 16 students max in a classroom. Sometimes we have 17 or 18 because of other situations. Sure. Someone came back from a trip, and now they're here again, and so we've let them come back, et cetera.
That's fascinating to me. And I like, so then do you... So then I'm just trying to get a visual of understanding. So Ambleside as a umbrella, you've got all the different schools that are operating very similarly to one another, I would imagine, teaching in similar ways. Do you have, then is your curriculum, is it altered at all school to school, or does it stay the same? First grade in Texas, first grade in Connecticut, first grade in Mozambique. Like, does that, or do you alter? Like, I would imagine you alter, but I'm curious how you
So we
do
don't
that.
we don't alter too much in the United States at all. I mean, except for state history.
Okay.
And sometimes there's choices, choose between these 3 books or choose between these 2 books. Mostly because it's hard to get rid of a book that these teachers are so endeared to and so, oh, but I love that book
remember
so
that too,
much.
yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this other book is good too.
It's okay. Yeah, change is okay sometimes.
How many states altogether in the?
I haven't counted the states. But in the countries, they have different first languages.
Sure.
And so I've chosen some books with other persons from those countries to say that this would be a good book and help in that way.
Is the idea that there would be more and you would continue to grow? I guess I ask because as people listen, maybe they want to look into Ambleside or a model like it. I don't know. Obviously not everyone that hears this is going to live close to one.
Right.
What would you counsel if they're interested in what you're talking about?
I would say if you're interested in what we're talking about, the first thing would be to come to one of our trainings so that we have a 3-day internship, which is at one of our schools. And we have probably 5 of those in this next coming year. And we say, come and see and participate. So we sit around a round table and we talk to one another about the philosophy. We read it, we narrate it, and then we answer questions and ask questions about it. Then they go into classrooms and it's real living. Like these lessons aren't modeled lessons. Oh, all right, here they come, begin. This is life as it is. And so sometimes they see things. I was surprised to see this. I said, it's normal.
Okay.
These are real people here.
Yeah.
And so they would see the model. They would see the model in action. They would see the philosophy in practice. They would see teachers who are trained. And I think they would get a glimpse of something that's really beautiful to see, that there's a high interaction time with students and teachers.
Is this something people could start on their own? I mean, could you plant an Ambleside if you want, or how does that work, or not really?
Sure. On our website, we have a whole section that says starting a school.
Okay. So I'm glad because we have been contacted by people who will say, we don't have an option in our area. We don't have this, we don't have that. Well, and of course our first response is, obviously, that is difficult if you do not have something that is right there. But a second response then would be, you can start one. You know, if you don't want, I would say, what we have kind of seen as traditional education. I think there's a lot in what Ambleside is doing that would be traditional, but it's different traditional. Kind of like I think how you were saying earlier, Maryellen, like it's modern, yet it's not. It's from the 1850s to now. So I think there's something to be said about saying, well, then I want to look into this and I want to create something like this because there is a need to get kids, I would say, out of some of the bell dictating the end of every class, sitting in a desk for the 45 minutes, non-experiential type learning. I think that has done, a real disservice to a lot of kids over the years. I mean, our own probably included, where you have to sit still, hold still, you're fighting against their natural inclination to be kids, even as they're 14, 15, 16. So I think that's awesome that they can just go on and attend a training, start reading. I would advocate reading a little of Charlotte Mason to get some of that, because it's not an easy read. Like picking those books up, that's not I'm just going to flip through and kind of skim. I mean, it is a thinker.
Yeah, it can. It can be intimidating.
A lot of information in there. If you had to pick a book for somebody to start with, Maryellen, what would you recommend? Somebody just to read. Someone's thinking, listening, hearing this, and like, I want to know just a little bit more.
And they're coming in cold. Let's say you know nothing
Right.
of what we're saying until today. This just intrigues you, but you want to learn more. What's a nice, what do you want to say?
Segue?
A barrier to entry that's low, minimal.
So I was part of a group of people that wrote a book called When Children Want to... wait. Oh, what?
You wrote it.
I know. When children love to learn. Yes.
When children love to
This
learn.
is edited. Praise the Lord. Anyhow, so I participated in writing a book called When Children Love to Learn.
Okay.
And even though it was written probably 20 years ago, there's still some things that are lasting in that book that I think they might be able to understand. Also, our website has videos in which Bill and I speak, and we talk about each of the principles of Charlotte Mason and how that's practiced in the classroom. And so you might want to look at that. And we have some other videos as well.
And so we'll make sure then that we put those links and that information and that book title, When Children Love to Learn, we'll put that down in our show notes as well. Because I do think I've just seen a lot in these. I specifically, as a parent, have seen in the last probably 5 to 7 years kind of this push and this realization, especially for parents of young kids who making sure things are biblically sound, that has to be first and foremost for them, but then treating a child as a whole and not just sticking them in to go along, to get along with the system, I think that is an important piece.
Well, meaning, if I could, I think I'll just summarize what I think you're saying is that the criticism oftentimes is that a Christian school setting is nothing more than just another machine like public school. And there's really, I think oftentimes we'll hear the criticism, there's not a dime's worth of difference between them. Do you hear that ever, Maryellen?
I think often, I thought the same thing because it's a veneer of Bible on a secular foundation, that where they're not treated anyway. They're treated in behavioristic terms. We're treating them like, if you don't do this, this is the punitive response, that we're not trying to bring you up. And we have demerits and detentions and other ways of giving them punitive a response to a behavior. And I think that, when you know children and you're with them, we have students, we have principles in which we operate in our high school that if you don't do your reading homework, then you have to stay after school that day and do it. So here we are. I'm a high school teacher, and I say to the students, tell us if you read. And so we go throughout, and a student will say, I didn't read. I'll be with you after school. And they're honest, because they might have had 20 pages to read in the high school for the next class. And then we'll have discussions, and it shouldn't be surprising, but for some people it's surprising that the children would tell the truth. Now, do we know for sure that they're all? No, we don't put them on a lie detector test to make sure that they're, telling the truth. Yeah. But we all fall short at times. Even teachers do. Even parents do. So it's good to admit it because they know.
Right.
And so they, sense a spirit of forgiveness and then do as they ought.
I think that's just, there's something about taking it kind of, back to the basics in a way, for lack of a better term. Yeah. I know that's one of the reasons I think my sister was so drawn to some of this, was that it took out a lot of the extraneous that she found or saw in the classroom, maybe with her oldest. I was very intrigued by it. I would sit and read, and start talking to you about it, and then think, I don't know if I can implement this and pull and homeschool and do it this way, or if I find a co-op that's using techniques and pedagogy found in Charlotte Mason's writings. It felt like a lot. And so I'm so glad to hear that you do have some of those resources available for people. And I think just finding a place to start, like with When Children Love to Learn, is important. And so we'll make sure we include that.
AmblesideSchools.org is the website if you want to check that out. And Maryellen, we are grateful for your time today. I hope we can continue to lean on you as a resource. Congratulations on the success of this over, to be an international school system now after just 24 years. I say just, but that's a robust growth. Yeah. Really, you must be thrilled.
That's impressive and exciting.
Do you have places, how much bigger do you think you could go?
Oh, we'd like to keep on growing. Yeah. It's important. There's a great need for it.
You bet there is. It's been great to meet your acquaintance, and hope we can have you back.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
There's a lot to learn in that conversation. So we put all the links in the description, right?
Below, absolutely. Down below, book titles, information on schools, on Ambleside. I just think making sure that as we're talking about all this, that it's, I was curious during that episode, I think during this episode specifically, I never want to come across like from a judgment place or point of view on things, what works for some people, how they start, what they do with their schools, what some people do with their education for their children. It's all going to be different. And I never, ever want to be critical, like be overly critical or throw shade at the one, we have our kid in this school and that's working for them. We just never want to be doing that for
There's
anybody.
too many choices out there to be that way.
And that's more of a benefit, I think, than anything. So as always, send us your comments, send us your thoughts, send us emails, social media, links, anywhere. And we will always be happy to respond, and let us know anyone else that you want to hear from. I think trying to dive into the homeschooling world is something informationally we'd like to continue to do. So if you have other resources, send them our way. We'd be happy to start kind of vetting some of those. And
5-star reviews and written reviews are always appreciated too, and your feedback as always. So until next week, thanks a lot for listening to Making the Leap.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. Please rate and comment on the show, as well as subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Making the Leap.